Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the DCYF ECAP webinar, Preventing and Responding to Child Abuse and Neglect. We'll get started here in about a minute. We'll just give an opportunity for folks to log in, to get settled, and get their audio set up and all of that. So we'll go for maybe 30 seconds to a minute just to make sure everybody gets logged in, and we'll get started. Thanks for being here today. All right, we see folks are still logging in. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the webinar, Preventing and Responding to Child Abuse and Neglect. My name is Ray Soriano, and I use he, him pronouns, and I'm on the DCYF ECAP team as an innovation and capacity specialist with the family engagement team with DCYF ECAP. And I'll introduce myself a little bit and my connection to this particular topic. And with me today is supporting is Leticia Cardenas, who won't be on camera, but Letty, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. Good morning, everyone. My name is Leticia Cardenas. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm gonna be here in the background helping Ray with anything that he needs. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat box. I hope you're having a wonderful morning, and get coffee, get settled. Ray is gonna do amazing.
Thank you, Letty. We also have some other folks supporting us with Carrie and Jess from our DCYF ECAP team as well. So thanks for being here. It's really great for you to spend time on this very important topic with us today. Just to remind you all, this webinar is being recorded so that you and your colleagues can access the recording of this webinar probably within a week or so when we post this onto our base camps. Let me tell you a little bit about myself and my connection to this particular topic and why it's important to ECAP and why it's important to me. Again, my name is Ray with the DCYF ECAP team, and I'm a parent first and foremost of a young adult, and just have learned a lot as a parent, as many of you out there who are in some sort of parent or caregiver role have learned. I've been with the ECAP team for almost 2 years, and with Department of Children, Youth and Families, DCYF, as well as Children's Administration, what DCYF used to be, for about 8 years, and that includes 5 years working for Child Protective Services, including experience working with tribes and indigenous communities. Also investigated abuse in licensed foster homes and licensed programs, and I've worked a lot with foster parents as well. And I have over 30 years working with children and families, and I'm still learning something new every year, including from all of you. And I've also been an early childhood education instructor in a local college, teaching a child abuse and neglect course within that program. I've also been an authorized facilitator for Darkness to Light, which is a child sexual abuse prevention program for adults. And I have that listed on the handout, as well as we'll be talking about that a little bit in the webinar today. And I've been a facilitator for many, many years. I also have a Master of Social Work, so I've learned a lot about abuse and neglect through that time. And it's a real honor for me to be part of this team to present this today. And some of you were part of a webinar on the same topic about a year ago now for both education support staff in ECAP, as well as family support staff in ECAP. And, you know, for me, I've been a child abuse prevention educator since I was about 20 years old. I was really naive then, but I knew that I had a big interest in preventing abuse and responding to abuse. And this many years later, I continue to learn, and just again, an honor and a privilege to be able to present this to you today, along with our team. Before we get going, I just want to let's see here, make sure that you all have are able to see the screen up here. I'm going to go ahead and advance the slide here to our welcome slide. I want to welcome you all. And here we are in May 2021, still in a pandemic that none of us had any expectations about how it was going to play out for ourselves, for children, for families that we work with, for our programs. Yeah, here we are. Even with a lot of challenge and even trauma, we have been moving forward. And for many of us, we're stronger because we're working together and because of our commitment to take care of each other, to take care of ourselves, and absolutely to be strong advocates for our children and families that we work with in our ECAP program. So just thanks to all of you on behalf of DCYF ECAP for all of your love and your work, your dedication, and all of just the energy that you have put into the children and families in your program and in your communities. So thank you for that. We're just really glad for you to be with us today. And before we get started, we just want to make sure that everybody has as positive an experience with this webinar as you can. And many of you are already familiar with these webinars, which includes that you have an option to provide some input and to ask some questions in the question box. So we're just going to make sure that you are oriented a little bit to the how GoToWebinar works for this webinar, because we're going to be using the question box rather than the chat box. And I wish that this was going to be more interactive, but because of this platform and because we want to make sure that this gets recorded, it's going to be a lot of just me talking along with some support from Leticia on our team, and an opportunity for us to have some question and answer time as well. Just want to remind you to keep yourself muted, to minimize the background noise. Also, there is a handout for this webinar, which is, you should be able to find that in the handouts of the toolbar that you should be able to see. And we're going to move into that in just a second here. Also, a reminder that this is being recorded so that you and your team members can watch this video again later on. So if you want to ask any questions and share comments, please do so by typing it into the question box. And we want you to use the question box rather than the chat box because we're able to save all of the questions just in case we can't answer all the questions that you have today during the webinar. We want to make sure that we get back to you with those questions, with answers to those questions. And we're able to save the question box, but we're not able to save the chat box. And again, if you take a look at the, should be able to see an orange sort of rectangular arrow, or an orange rectangle with an arrow in it, and you're going to be able to see a lot of different options within that, including the handouts. If you're not able to access the handouts through the toolbar, I did post the handouts in both of the base camps. So feel free to grab those. I really want to make sure that you have those. That will help with your note taking. That will help you to be able to return to the content of this training later on, because there's a lot of important information there for you. And just to have some practice with using the question box, I'm going to ask a question here and just would love for you to type something in the question box, and Letty is going to be paying attention to the question box, as will I. And want to just ask, let's do this. It's sort of a topic for many of us that we pay attention to. What is your favorite type of weather? What is your favorite type of weather? If you can type that into the question box just to do some practice, we would love to see that you're able to access the question box and to know the answer to that question. What is your favorite type of weather? And we're seeing that coming in. I'm paying attention to that myself. We see some sunny and sunshine. Oh, fall for sure. I'm a fall weather kind of person myself. Somebody who said, I wish fall was all year long. Absolutely. Warm weather, sunny and 70s. Yeah. Late spring, beautiful and warm. And someone who said, I enjoy a slight breeze where it's a little bit chilly. All right. Thank you for putting those in. Of course, we're not going to read through all of those in the interest of time, but we do love to take a look at that later on. It appears that at least most of you are able to access the question box. So again, that's where we're going to be asking you to provide some input and to ask any questions that you might have, and we'll make sure to get to that. What I'll be doing today is I will be going through the content, and then periodically I'm going to stop and check with Letty to see if she is seeing any questions in the question box, so we can make sure to answer them. All right. And at the end of today's webinar, there will be a survey sent out to you just for us to get some feedback about how the webinar went for you, how useful it was for you, and if you have any suggestions. So hey, you'll be able to see that at the end of this webinar. It'll be arriving to you via email. All right. I want to make sure to acknowledge the native land that at least that I am on. I am on the unceded territory of the Tulalip, Stillaguamish, Snohomish, and Sauk-Suiattle people who have lived and thrived in this area, otherwise known as Everett, Washington, where I live and I work out of my home office, and the larger Snohomish County, as well as other Coast Salish people. And just want to recognize the resilience, the strength, and the wisdom of the people whose lands we inhabit. I also want to acknowledge, because we're talking about child abuse and neglect during this session, really important for all of us, and certainly for me as a presenter here, to acknowledge the generations of abuse and neglect that Native children have endured at the hands of colonization and colonizers. And that's been through boarding schools and other institutions. And even though for many of us, we might have some familiarity with that through our learning of history and might think that that was something in the past, certainly a lot of it was, and there continues to be effects in Native families and tribal communities today. And it's important for us to learn about and remember that really dark and tragic history in order for us to better understand trauma, not only in their communities, but in other communities, and also so that we do not repeat or add to that trauma as we move forward with our work. So I want to make sure that we acknowledge that. So today, again, you should be able to access the handout, and I'm going to keep drinking water here as I go along. The handout has all of the PowerPoint talking points and links to resources that I'll be sharing today in this webinar. And this is a really complex topic. We're only going to get through so much in an hour and a half, including some question and answer time. And I want to let you know that if you want to go deeper into the issue of child abuse and neglect, including how to work with child protective services and foster parents, and a lot of other issues in relation to culture, etc. I will be co-facilitating, along with other members of the DCYF team, a set of trainings. It's 5 different days during WASA's Summer Institute beginning in June. So do make sure to check out the WASA website if you're interested in diving even deeper than we're able to go today on this topic. Today we're going to be diving into these objectives, these learning pieces here. We're going to learn about protective factors in families, something you might already be familiar with. We're going to review types of child abuse and neglect. So that's going to be a basic overview of the types. We'll learn ways to prevent harm to children and respond to suspected child abuse and neglect during virtual and in-person services. We know that many of you out there have, for a long time already, or maybe just for a short time, have returned to in-person services, both classroom as well as visiting with families. And so there are some unique things to learn and for us to continue to do depending on how your delivery of services is happening. We're also going to briefly review state reporting policies. That's always a good thing to do. And we'll learn about other training and resources on preventing child abuse. We'll also, as I mentioned, have an opportunity for some question and answer. Also, you know, this is a reminder that while we're talking about child abuse and neglect, it's very much related to the broader spectrum of family violence that includes domestic violence. So much of this can be applied to how we work with families who may be experiencing domestic violence in their home. And at the end, we're going to end in what I always like to end in a hopeful way. So we'll end with a song that I'll be singing, and hopefully you can sing along too as well. So we will get to that. All right. We recognize that this may be a particularly hard topic for many of us, not just because of the work that we're doing and how much we've worried about children and families that we are working with, but maybe you have your own personal experiences about abuse in your own family or with people that you know. Most of us are connected in some way, shape, or form to abuse and neglect of children, either in the past or currently. I certainly am. And so this is just a reminder to please remember to take care of yourself. I do love this image that's on the screen here. You can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourself first. And that means get support if you need. Make sure to take breaks and replenish yourself. And we're all going to continue to get through the hardships that we're experiencing individually as well as collectively. And then be sure to be gentle with yourself. Some of us are familiar with that idea or that metaphor of when before an airplane is about to take off, the airplane staff are talking about the air masks that come down in case of an emergency. And we're always taught, if you've ever ridden in an airplane, to make sure to put that mask on yourself before you put it on a child. And even though that's sort of counterintuitive to us, for many of us as adults, it just is another reminder that we need to make sure we're taking care of ourselves so we can do the best for children and families that we're working with, okay? And we know that you've all gotten as good as you can about caring for yourselves, so please continue to do that. So these are just a couple of headlines. These are actually a little bit older from when the pandemic hit. And I don't want to dwell on this. We're going to be talking, of course, about the what to do about these things. But you can see a couple of these headlines like that child abuse hotlines are getting fewer calls, and that a lot of experts who in the field of child welfare are worried that child abuse will increase when families are isolated at home. And this is found to be true for sure. Calls to CPS have been lower over the last year or more, but abuse has most likely increased. This is something that is known, but we don't even know the extent of that. And for those of us who work on a day in and day out basis with children and families, that might bring for us a feeling of helplessness, feeling of hopelessness, certainly feeling really, really sad and really worried about children and families. That's certainly the case for me and for all of the of my team members on the DCYF ECAP team. And as we know, children and families who are enrolled in ECAP and Head Start as well and other programs like that, we serve children and families who are already experiencing a variety of challenges, including abuse and neglect in the home and involvement with CPS. And of course, there's just a whole lot of stress. I know for me, I've had to worry about my blood pressure going up over this past year. A lot of it has to do with just worrying about how people are doing out there. And we can't stop all abuse from happening, but there are a lot of things we can do to help prevent and respond to abuse and neglect. So I don't want to dwell on that. Here's another one here just before we move on that is specific to Washington State, and reports have dropped. And this is from December 10th of 2020 from the Seattle Times, that there have been 59% fewer reports to CPS than prior to the pandemic. And of course, there's still worry that there's more or even more severe abuse that is happening, even though there have been fewer reports. And again, this is known, and the work that we are doing in ECAP is helping that trend change. Let's see here, before we go on to that one there, I want to do a poll here. And let's see here, I'm going to make sure I can launch the poll. For many of you since the pandemic started, maybe you have already made a report to CPS. I'm going to launch a poll here that will run for maybe 30 seconds or so. Hopefully you'll be able to see it on your screen. If you are joining us via phone, then you can, or you're not able to access this poll, then you can go ahead and put it in the question box. But I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. Let's see here. Let's see. All right. So we got the poll going. How many reports to CPS have you made since the pandemic started, if any? And this gives us an opportunity. We have about 100 attendees on this webinar today. This gives us a sense across the state of just sort of how much reporting that we coming out of ECAP, or maybe you've done this personally as well. So we'll let that poll go for a little bit longer. All right, looks like about 75% of you have completed the poll. We'll let it go a little bit longer here since we're just starting out. Okay, we'll go ahead and close the poll now in about 5 seconds. All right, and about 80% of you have voted. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And a couple of you said put in the question box that you've made 0 reports. Wondering if you're able to see the results. Are you able to see that on the screen? I'm not exactly sure as the presenter here. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and share that. Let's see here. So I'm sharing the poll results. So about three-fourths of you, 76% of you. Oh, good. Looks like you're able to see the results. 76 have made no reports to CPS. And of course, that doesn't mean really anything in regard to, oh, am I doing my job? That's not the point of this. This is just to see sort of how things have been going. 17% have made 1 report to CPS since the pandemic started. And 8%, so that's almost 10%. That is, 1 out of 10 of you have made 2 or more reports to CPS since the pandemic started. And even for those of you who are in that 76% group, if you will, I'm quite sure that you have thought about it, you wondered about it, you've talked with your team about whether a report hasn't been needed to be made. And why this is important and why I like to include this in our session today is just for us to have some reflection, because preventing and responding to abuse, suspected abuse and neglect isn't all about reporting to CPS. That's not the only piece of this, but it is good for us to take a look at what the trend has been, at least for those of us who are participating in this webinar today. So I'm wondering if you can put in the question box, again, not in the chat box, but in the question box, for those of you who have made at least 1 report to CPS this year. Really briefly, what are the types of things that you've reported? And of course, keep this confidential. We're going to make sure we don't put any children's or family names in here. But what are the types of concerns that you've had that you reported to CPS this year? We'll take a minute. If you can put that into the question box, then we can take a look at those and reflect. So what types of reports have you made to CPS? What are some of the concerns? See somebody put physical abuse, supervision, and potential neglect. Yeah. Frequently late to pick up a child. That could be an indicator. Neglect. Again, neglect. Domestic violence that resulted in a child injury. Yeah. Physical abuse and neglect. There's definitely a range here. So thanks for those of you who were able to put it in the box. And for those of you who didn't, that's okay. We know that there's that there's a range of these things. So we're going to be getting into this a little bit more deeply. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the poll results. And let's see here. I want to make sure that I'm still sharing my screen. Here. All right, looks like I'm still sharing my screen. Great. Thanks for that reflection and for participating in that poll. That gives us a little sense about what's going on out there in your worlds and in your programs. So again, I don't want to dwell on that reality. It's really important, really important for us, particularly when we just get down and we feel like that we're helpless and even hopeless about some of the trauma that kids and families are experiencing. Is that we want to focus on what we can do, what we're already doing, and what we can continue to do or to even strengthen our efforts, because we are already doing things to protect children and support families. And again, that is reporting to CPS is just one piece of that. There's a lot of other things that we're doing and that we can continue to do to protect children. I love this image up here. Hope is being able to see that there's a light despite all of the darkness. Yeah, no problem, Maya. I see in the question box that you need to go to another training. No problem. Again, for anybody who needs to either take a break or needs to leave for another meeting, there will be a recording of this webinar for you to access later on. So it's really important for us to continue doing what we're doing and to have hope and to support families in having a sense of hope about their situation. We're going to move into a part now here that is related to having that sense of hope and having and being able to support families along those lines. I'm actually continuing to look at the question box, and I appreciate the comment from Christine here. Our class was virtual classes and support, not as many eyes on kiddos and families. We may have not seen potential signs during that time, and we are not back in person. Yeah, that is one of the biggest worries. Thanks for that comment. And I know that that is a similar worry and a similar situation to many of you out there. Oh, thanks, Christine. You are now back in person. Not that you are not back in person. Yeah, you are now back in person. So we're able to see kids. We're able to see parents. We're able to see the family together, perhaps during a drop-off or pickup, or even during a family event, if you're able to do any of those. I know many of us really aren't able to yet. But before, we were not able to, and that's been one of the biggest challenges. And so we're going to talk about that through our course today as well. So I want to talk about protective factors here. It's something that many of you are already familiar with. And this comes from Strengthening Families, which is a national program. And in Washington, Strengthening Families is also a framework and is a program that's through DCYF. And in your handout, as well as on the screen here, you can see the link to Strengthening Families. There are 5 protective factors in families that are known to help reduce child abuse and neglect. And this is based on research, and this is based on a lot of work over many, many years with children and families in order to learn how they are strengthened. And these are the 5 things. Knowledge of parent and child development. So that includes, parents learning about resources, parent education, learning about their child's development. And that includes if a child has disabilities, if a child has suspected disabilities, it's all of those things. And it also includes supporting parents and caregivers as the child's first and most important teacher. So that's all built into knowledge of parenting and child development. And then there's social connections, and we already know this, but that's helping parents and caregivers and families connect with their social supports, connect with other parents, right, through virtual and in-person family events, and also hosting cultural activities. That's another great way for us to support families in their social connections. A third protective factor here is parent resiliency. We've been talking about resilience and resiliency for a long time, and certainly through this pandemic, not just for parents and families, but for ourselves as well. What does that look like? That includes promoting self-care. That includes recognizing strengths and wisdom that parents and caregivers have and that families have. That's helping parents to set goals and solve problems. And that also includes supporting specific groups and categories of parents. That includes fathers, divorced parents, any family members and parents that are incarcerated, etc. So that's also reaching out, and all of the work we've been doing to support individual parents. And then a fourth protective factor is concrete support in times of need. What does that mean? So concrete support means some real practical supports and resources, and that includes the things that all of us, all of you, have been doing throughout the pandemic. That's connecting to resources, that's providing some basic needs like food, basic supplies, school materials, and other materials. That's helping them connect to internet service, support regarding housing, regarding their utilities, all of those things that you have collectively been just really resourceful about over the last 12 to 14 months during the pandemic, and even before that, of course. And then, also providing access to things, even if you can't provide them yourselves, is helping them to get access to it. And the fifth protective factor here, known to help reduce child abuse and neglect, is social and emotional competence of children. This is maybe one we don't think about as much in regard to, hey, how do we strengthen families so that there is less abuse and neglect in the family? When children are have much more ability in their social emotional sort of learning and in their competence, if they know how to express themselves, if they learn about their emotions, if they feel like they belong, then those are absolutely important in helping strengthen families and reducing abuse and neglect. So that means our ECAP classrooms that emphasize belonging and safety and cultural connection and social emotional development. That also includes how we help our parents and caregivers to connect to their children, not just their children's education, but their children's social and emotional life. And I see a great comment here from Maria Elizabeth that in the question box. We work with the families to engage them with supportive programs to achieve the best outcomes for the children. Absolutely, couldn't have said it better myself. And so while we have this worry because parents and families have been struggling and there's perhaps a higher or more intensive sort of experiences of abuse in homes, but we're not able to see it as much when we're in virtual delivery of our ECAP programs. We also are already and have been since ECAP started and continue to, in even a stronger way, been supporting families through these 5 protective factors. I want to, if we were all together, I would say, hey, raise your hand if you agree, if you believe that we are doing these 5 things in ECAP. But since I can't see your hands, in the question box, if you agree, if you believe that we have been on a regular, consistent basis providing these things and helping to provide these things, these 5 protective factors for families, go ahead and type it into the question box, because this is an opportunity for us to, if we were in a room together, I would have us all yell yes, because I don't think we give ourselves enough credit or enough recognition. Not that we ever want credit for things, it's not how we run, but I just think that we need to just recognize that we are providing these things. I'm actually getting emotional thinking about it, because that's why ECAP is so important, folks. That's why we are so important to families in our communities. We are providing these, we are supporting these. Thank you. I see it all in the box here, in the question box. Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you for your responses there. And guess what? As you may have heard, we're able to expand ECAP. We're going to be getting even more slots. We're going to be able to provide these things and much more to even more families in our community. So thank you for that, and thank you for the work that you're doing. All right, we'll go on to this next slide here. So we're going to talk just briefly about the types of abuse and neglect. You're already familiar with this. All of you have received child abuse and neglect training because that's also part of the performance standards for ECAP, is that there are, that there is training for each of the staff members and even volunteers in ECAP programs. We'll talk a little bit about each of these. I will share just some pieces about these. So these are the 4 main types of abuse that are recognized when it comes to investigations and such. And this is commonly sort of how this is broken down across the country: physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, and sexual abuse. So some of the common indicators of physical abuse, that might be things, if we're seeing on a child, like unexplained burns or bites or bruises, etc. This also could be things like faded bruises or other marks, or if a child is really frightened around one of their parents or caregivers, like in a way that is unnatural or uncharacteristic of them. Those might be some considerations. And again, that has been a little bit more challenging. That has been a little bit more challenging when it comes to virtual delivery of services. And I see a comment here that I'm just going to call out here. Oh, from my friend. Thank you. In box, it's Catherine. Thank you for putting this in. Yes, I believe we have been doing this for years, but it's been difficult for our teachers and family supports to overcome connection challenges. Parents have also really partnered with us to communicate and receive resources. So grateful to them. Absolutely. We are in partnership with parents. Thank you so much for that comment. And yeah, it has been hard for sure. We can only do so much, we can only do so much. And we can also push ourselves to do and think and be even more creative about how we can be supporting families. Thank you for that comment. So that's just a little bit there about physical abuse. So with emotional abuse, some of the common indicators, actually, I'm going to jump back up to physical abuse because I forgot to mention some things just in regard to parents or other adult caregivers. Often, with there could be some conflicts that are happening with the parents. Some parents who really might describe a child in really negative terms or use harsh physical discipline with a child. Those could be some other indicators of physical abuse. Emotional abuse can be a little bit harder to detect, but that could also show up as extreme behaviors with a child, such as overly compliant or demanding behavior, or some aggression happening with the child. Or it could be that there is some delayed physical or emotional development happening with the child. Certainly, if a child is reporting that they are being belittled at home, or they report a lack of attachment to the parent, those are some of the indicators there. As far as what the parents might and caregivers might be exhibiting potentially around emotional abuses, they might be constantly blaming or belittling a child, or seems unconcerned about a child when the child is really needing some real deep support, or really rejects the child. I know I'm going through these pretty quickly, but again, I know you already have some familiarity with these. And with neglect, this is probably the most common type of abuse, is neglect of children, but can be one of the hardest to detect. So some of the possible indicators of neglect is frequent absence from school, and of course that's been really tricky when we've done virtual services. A child might be lacking needed medical or dental care, or things like glasses, or things that are going to help them to function in the world. If a child is consistently dirty or has some severe body odor. Now, messy children, that doesn't necessarily mean that neglect is happening, but when we're seeing it happening consistently, or we're seeing real severe cases of that, then those are some of the things to have a little bit more worry about. And of course, if a child is reporting to you that there's no one to provide care at home, or that they're lacking a lot of the basic needs at home, then that's another indicator as well. And if you see or witness that a parent or child appears to be really indifferent to their, a parent or adult seems to be really indifferent to their child, that could be another indicator. Or, although abusing alcohol or drugs is not in and of itself an indicator of abuse and neglect in the home, those things are known to really contribute at times to abuse and neglect in the home. So that could be a contributor to neglect of children. And then that last type is sexual abuse. And common indicators for this, and this is one of the most difficult to detect. And as somebody who's been a child sexual abuse prevention educator for a long time, I even still continue to learn about how do we end sexual abuse of children. And it is such a difficult and really secretive type of abuse. And so some of the indicators here is a child might have some physical difficulties with walking or sitting, that is unexplained, for example, or is reporting, of course, that there is some inappropriate touch that's happening, or has just really bizarre and really unnatural knowledge about sex and sexuality. Again, kids have a natural curiosity, and they're learning about their bodies, etc. But we're talking about things that are unusual, or really really unnatural, that they might have knowledge about. And of course, if they report that as well, as I mentioned before. So those are just some of the types of abuse. Again, there's great information on the DCYF website. I really encourage you to continue to learn about this through that website and through other websites as well. All right, so we're going to move into some ways to support families and decrease the likelihood of abuse. So these are some things that I've pulled from just this past year. The Zero Abuse Project has a great resource called Responding to Child Abuse and Neglect During a Pandemic, 25 tips for multidisciplinary teams. And then Darkness to Light, which is the national organization that provides child sexual abuse prevention training for adults. They also have a great webinar called Protecting Children During a Crisis. And those are, again, those are in the handout. So now we're going to move into this, this section of ways that we can support families and decrease likelihood of abuse. Of course, being aware of signs that a parent or caregiver may be harming a child. Those are the types of things we just talked about. And I will also be sharing a little bit more from a recent DCYF educational video that specifically pertains to being aware of the signs. We can check on the children and families that are most in need, and we know who those are. We know our families well. And by most in need, those are the ones that are maybe the least connected to our program, that might be isolated, that may have histories of abuse and neglect in their family already based on what they've reported to you, that are really struggling on a lot of different levels. Make a list of who those are, really pay attention and have a plan as a team. We can always help families by being gentle and encouraging to families. As we know, this has been really, really stressful. Life is already stressful for a lot of families, and the pandemic has just brought layer upon layer of additional stress. You can also encourage families to have daily routines. It is well known, and there are, we preach about routines in ECAP a lot, whether it's in the classroom or at home. And what research shows too is that when there are routines in the home, that helps bring stress down, that helps parents to feel like they're managing their home, so to speak, and abuse is less likely in homes that have some daily routines and some structure. You can also encourage parents to take care of themselves as best as they can. And we've already been doing that, but we can continue to do that, and helping them to recognize that they need to take breaks, that they need to have good health in order for their kids to be healthy, etc. And for many of them, that also includes connecting them to resources that might help them with an addiction, and certainly helping them with their improved mental health. You can also encourage families to stay connected with their families and friends and cultural heritage. Again, this goes back to the social supports that are part of the 5 protective factors. You can support parents and caregivers in staying connected to those services that are in their community and that we are helping them to connect to. That could include the things we've talked about, like housing, mental health, substance abuse, CPS, financial, etc. And always be working together within your team and within the broader teams. Many of us work with school districts, for example, or we work with other agencies in our communities. Where it's appropriate, share information, but always, of course, keep confidentiality according to your policies. But be working as teams, because that saying, it takes a village to raise children. That's really true in this case when it comes to protecting families and protecting children. We want to make sure to respect families' cultural values and traditions while putting child safety first. For many of us, we might think that parenting practices that are sort of culturally based might be different than what we believe is sort of good parenting or positive parenting or even safe parenting. It's really important that we learn about as much as we can about those cultural practices and values and traditions, and also balance that with putting child safety first when we are suspecting that abuse and neglect might be happening. And that could be tricky to do. Certainly, we need to be sure to report anytime we suspect abuse and neglect and report it to CPS. And we'll be talking about that a little bit more here shortly. And this is something many of us might not be aware of or have ever needed to do, but any one of us can call law enforcement if we feel like a child is in immediate danger. Certainly a call to CPS helps, but law enforcement can conduct a welfare check on any home. As a CPS worker before, this is something that I also had advised early learning professionals to do as well, in case that there's something that they really believe that there's immediate danger. Let's say you see something on a Zoom screen or something that you feel like there's immediate danger, you can always call law enforcement. Also, to communicate with a child's CPS worker if CPS is involved, or if a child is in foster care, is to communicate with their caseworker and or their foster family. And again, a reminder that you cannot do it all. We can't, but we can do the best that we can. There is a recent, really short video, but it's really powerful, that was released by DCYF. By DCYF, that's the agency that that ECAP is administered out of and that I work for. And I did share this video on Basecamp a little while back, but this is a good reminder that it's there. But we're going to go through these signs of abuse and neglect to recognize during a video call. We know that many of us are, of course, still operating with some virtual programming and virtual delivery. We're going to go through these one by one. So again, during a video call, if you see unexplained bruises or marks on a child, that might be one thing to recognize. A parent, caregiver, or adult is using harsh physical discipline. Now, I know that this can be tricky. Parents are stressed out, and I, as a parent, excuse me, have I yelled at my child before? Certainly. So this is something for us to gauge based on what we know about that family and based on what we're seeing in the video screen. So if we're seeing this, this might be an indicator. Also, if we are noticing and observing safety hazards that's within a child's reach. Now, we work with young children, and now with early ECAP, which many of you are involved in, we're working with children from birth to age 5. And if there are significant safety hazards within a child's reach that we are noticing, such as an unsecured weapon or drugs or unsanitary conditions, those are some things for us to be sure to keep an eye out on. Also, the absence of food or family members. The absence of food or family members that appear to be losing weight. We know that kids need nutrition, right? And so this is one thing that if we're noticing either that there isn't food, or that that we're noticing a child or other family member is just having some significant weight loss, that's something for us to be paying attention to for sure. Perishable food, in other words, food that might get rotten, that's been sitting out for multiple days. Most families that are doing pretty well, or even if they're struggling a little bit, they're not going to be leaving perishable food out on a table or in the area that you're seeing in the Zoom screen for long periods of time. But if you're seeing it sitting out in the same thing, then that is something for us to be sure to recognize and maybe make a call. Aggressive or repeated shouting. We've already heard from some of you that during Zoom calls, these are the types of things that you're seeing. And of course, we're talking about more extreme around some shouting, aggressive or repeated shouting. And I see a question here from Margaret. Thank you. What about significant unhealthy weight gain due to junk food and excessive eating? That's a really good question, because as we know too, families have been stuck at home. They've been sedentary. In other words, they haven't had a lot of activity, and maybe they aren't having access to healthier foods. So that is one of those just judgment calls that any of us can have around whether the food that kids are eating is healthy for them, or if they're having access to some healthy food. But that's a really good question, Margaret. Again, something that, weight loss, we talk about that, but certainly if a child is unhealthy or moving towards an unhealthy state on the other direction, that could be cause for concern too. So thank you for that question. In a Zoom or video call, if we're hearing hitting or things are being broken, that could be an indicator as well for us to watch for. And I think this is the final one of that's in this video, is the caregiver appearing intoxicated and unable to provide care. Hopefully you haven't seen that, but again, with the stress in families' home, and as we know, many parents and caregivers are struggling with an addiction, that this could be something that is a red flag for us. I see another comment here. For weight gain, I usually just ask if they have access to fresh food or what their diet is like. Thank you, Emily. Yeah, that's a great reminder for us, is just to ask questions about what type of nutrition those kids are getting at home. Thank you. Oh, I'm losing my voice a little bit here. Thank you for the comments and questions, folks. Really appreciate that. We're going to move into a section here on, I know we're moving to this kind of quickly, but we want to make sure to get through all of the content. Again, if you need to take a break on your own, we don't have one built in here, but if you need to, feel free to do so. And again, this content is in the handout, as well as there will be a recording of this. So reporting suspected abuse and neglect. We won't get too deep into this because all of you, if you're working in ECAP programs, you are already getting this kind of training. But remember that you are a mandated reporter. and that CPS has still been going. Child Protective Services has functioned through the pandemic and continue to. And also to make sure to follow your program's child abuse and neglect reporting policy and procedure. Every program that is running ECAP, that is implementing ECAP services, is required in the performance standards to have a child abuse reporting policy and procedure. So make sure you follow that. And of course, work as a team. I see a question in the box here. If a caregiver smells like pot, I think that's what you meant to say. Do we need to report? Oh, a question that comes up pretty often, Liliana, is this one. You know, if a caregiver smells like pot, do we need to report? We can probably approach this in the same way that if a caregiver smells like alcohol or something else that we might think that there is some sort of potential impairment there. In and of itself, and this is for you to talk about in your teams, but as far as, you know, in and of itself, if that's what you're seeing, is that reportable? Not necessarily. I know that's not a clear answer, but not necessarily. Now, if you're seeing other pieces that are connected to that, other indications of neglect or abuse of the child, or if you are seeing that while you're providing in-person services in the classroom, a parent is coming and picking up their child or dropping off their child, and you are smelling alcohol or marijuana, then that is definitely something that we would advise that you approach the parent about if it's safe, and just check in with them to see if they are okay, if they are capable of providing transport, etc. And yeah, there is an awareness. Thank you, Laura. There's a comment here to be aware that some people work in the industry in regard to working in the industry now that marijuana is legal in the state of Washington, and that sometimes that smell tends to linger, and they go nose blind to it. Yeah, that's definitely true. So really, there isn't cut and dry, real easy answers to some of these questions. I have had many opportunities as a child care provider and as a Head Start and ECAP provider over the years. Many instances, too many than I would want to have, where a parent has either smelled like alcohol or smelled like marijuana or something else. And again, in and of itself, it isn't an automatic report, but you got to put all the pieces together and you got to assess in the moment whether the child might be at risk of abuse and neglect. So thank you for that question. It's a good one for us to continue to talk about, and maybe something that you can talk about in your teams as well. We're going to do another poll right now. This is one that I did when we did this webinar before as well. So I'm going to take a look at this second poll here. And let's see here. I am going to try to pull up that other poll. And this question is, how familiar are you with your individual program's child abuse and neglect reporting policy and procedure? And I want you to be honest here. This isn't a judgment thing. This is just for us to have awareness of, you know, hey, maybe we need to go back and take a look at our reporting policy. I'm going to launch this poll. How familiar are you with your program's child abuse and neglect reporting policy or procedure? And if you're not able to access the poll, then go ahead and put it into the chat box. Whether you're very familiar, you're kind of familiar, not very familiar, or you don't even you weren't even aware that your program has a reporting policy. So we'll let this poll go for a little while here. Thanks to those of you who are able to access it already. And I'll tell you what, one way that you get more familiar with your program's policy is when you have to make a report yourself. I know that that's how it was for me. I needed to revisit it. But also, hopefully, your program is providing not just, you know, for sure annual training, but even more often than that around what your policy is. We'll let this go for about 10 or 15 more seconds, and then we'll close the poll and we'll show the results. All right, about 5 more seconds. Like about 75% of you have completed this little poll. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll up here, and we're going to take a look at the results. So hopefully you'll see this on the screen. So 66% of you said you're very familiar with your abuse and neglect reporting policy and procedures. 31% said kind of familiar, and 3% said not very familiar, and none of you who voted said that you didn't know that your program had a reporting policy or procedure. So those look like really strong numbers. Again, it's just a reminder for us to be familiar with them, because oftentimes when it comes to either thinking about reporting or when the time comes to actually make a report, you're going to want to be as comfortable as you can, because it's not an easy thing to do. And as those of you who've done it, and I've had to make, I would probably say 20 to 25 reports over my career, including as a CPS worker. And every time it's not an easy thing to do, even as somebody who is familiar with reporting. So this is just a reminder that, to revisit that and to make sure that you are familiar as you can be with your program's abuse and neglect reporting policy and procedure. Thanks for taking that poll. I'm gonna go ahead and hide those results. I'm going to make sure that you can see the see my screen still. Right. Okay, great. And we're going to move on here. So we're almost at the end of this this webinar. I want to share some additional supports. Actually, let me go here. Yeah, want to just make note of some other resources and training. These are things in the handout. The DCYF website continues to grow and expand in regard to information, resources, videos, etc., related to abuse and neglect. As a reminder to you all out there, so ECAP is administered under Department of Children, Youth, and Families, and so is CPS. And so we do have some connections in ECAP to what we call child welfare side of DCYF, but the website is really, really great. And there's a lot of great resources there. Darkness to Light also has a website and webinars. And if you wanted to engage in some deeper level training about preventing and responding to child sexual abuse, then Darkness to Light is a great resource for that. Again, I'm an authorized facilitator of those trainings. Also, 0 to 3 and Zero Abuse Project. And then National Alliance on Mental Illness has a great COVID-19 mental health guide. And one of the other ones to note is a newer resource is the Child Welfare Information Gateway, which is a website and a platform for Administration for Children and Families, which is a federal program. Just released a 2021-22 Child Abuse Prevention Resource Guide. That's wonderful, and it's got just a lot of great additional resources for your ongoing learning. Right. So that's the end of the content of the presentation. I hope that wasn't too fast or too much info coming to you, really super fast. And I want to make note of another comment in the box just around the question of if a parent is smelling like marijuana. A comment by Carla that she had a parent who worked at a marijuana plant. In other words, where marijuana is manufactured, now that it has been legalized in the state of Washington for a while. And that parent would come in smelling like it and sometimes would have the flakes stuck on her clothes. So yeah, that's important to note that there might be a number of reasons why a parent or caregiver that we might notice that they smell like marijuana, including that they might work in a plant or in a distribution company. Thank you for that, Carla. So I'm wondering if there are any other questions that are coming up for you, any comments, and we'll give a little bit of time here, and I'll keep an eye out on the question box. And Letty, who has been supporting me on the DCYF team here, thank you for that, Letty. And as you can see, I've been able to see the question box myself. So, so thanks for keeping an eye on it.
Yes, right. I noticed. I was like, he knows how to do this. We're all good.
Thank you, Letty. I appreciate that. All right, I see something in the question box from Kate that says, we have had CPS let the family know that they received the call from us, which created a lot of tension and issues with the family who ended up pulling their child. It makes us nervous to call CPS again. And Kate, that's really unfortunate. So just to summarize that, it sounds like a family let you know after you made a report on about the family to CPS, the family let you know that CPS informed them that your center, your program was the one that made the call. What I know from CPS training and being connected to Child Protective Services, the program and the workers, is that CPS workers are trained not to provide, in fact, they really shouldn't be providing what the source of the phone call, what the source of the report is. That's supposed to be confidential, and that's not supposed to be revealed. I'm not sure what happened in that situation, Kate. It is not the normal practice for CPS to do that. Now, do many families sort of on their own figure out or try to figure out where a report came from? They certainly do. And of course, if you are ECAP or childcare or Head Start, then you are, or school, then you are a likely source of that call to CPS. And what I would say, Kate, in that, or to anybody else who has experienced that and who might have feel nervous, or that you're not sure that you want to do that again because that will affect your relationship with the family, is to, if you have that CPS worker's contact information, is to check in with them about that. But also to, for many ECAP providers, I know that we've heard from many of you that you actually are informing the parents when you have made a call to CPS. And again, that as DCYF ECAP, we're not saying that should be your practice, but you need to be checking on your own policy and talking with your own team and your leadership in your programs around how do you navigate that. But again, Kate and others who might have experienced that, I'm sorry that that's been the case, and that's really unfortunate that they appear to have learned about your phone call to CPS from CPS themselves. That shouldn't be happening. So hopefully that wouldn't deter you from calling CPS again on a family, because that is really, it can be really damaging to the relationship, as you said. And a question here that the additional resources can be accessed through the DCYF website, correct? And the answer to that, Lupe, is that the additional resources that I listed here and that I referred to are on the handout, and the handout is in the webinar. If you go to the toolbar and you click under handouts. Also, I posted the handout in both of the base camps. So that's the ECAP education staff support base camp, as well as the family support or mobility mentoring base camp. So you should be able to access, there's links to those additional resources there. So hopefully you can get through it through those. And a question here, another question is, how would you move forward with a student who says one of his parents, quote, flips them off constantly? That's tricky, Araceli. And if we were in a group together all in space, I would say, hey, how would any of you deal with that? Or how would you address that or move forward? Again, if a child says that one of his parents flips them off constantly, in other words, shows their middle finger, is what I'm guessing this is about. So, the advice I would give is to talk to that family and just sort of see what might be going on, because it just might be an opportunity for some education, etc. Now, again, in and of itself, if we're talking about swearing around children or swearing at children, that in and of itself isn't necessarily abuse or neglect, but it might be a cause of concern. So I would suggest that if that's the situation, to talk amongst your team about how you might handle that. and also to check in with the family. And somebody did comment on that and say, I would say, you know, Johnny said the weirdest thing. Yeah, that's a one way to approach it, Kim. Thank you. You know, so-and-so, your child said the weirdest thing. They said this. And so I'm just wondering, wanted to check in with you about that. And, you know, for all you know, it might be a parent who says, oh, we joke around like that or something. And, you know, you might be able to get a better sense of what the situation might be. So thank you for that. And Christine wrote in the question box, I normally let the family know that I am a mandated reporter and that I will be making a call. However, I am there by their side to support them through the process. Yeah, again, thank you, Christine. Again, we've heard from many of you out there in ECAP land that that is one of the ways that you, according to your policy and your practices in your program, to approach reporting suspected abuse and neglect is to actually talk to the family. And here's the tricky thing is sometimes we might think that if we tell the family that we're making the report, that might cause them to then kind of retreat or isolate themselves. And so that's a consideration that we just need to keep in mind when we make a decision of whether or not to inform a family that we are making a report to CPS. But thank you for that comment. And Cece said, I often tell the parent I am calling, why I am calling, and that we will get through it together. Yeah, thank you. Another comment here from Christine. It helps build trust when you have that conversation, if it is safe to do so. Absolutely. And we've even heard from some of you out as family support and family service specialists out there, as well as some directors, that sometimes, in some cases, the family is really grateful that they got the services that they needed after CPS got involved. That has happened before too. And that helps to build trust as well. Another comment here is one of the pandemic cons or negatives are the home visits, because through them, we can observe that parents and children are having strong bonds. Yeah, through the pandemic, I'm thinking, Maria Elizabeth, that you're talking about that we haven't been able to have as many home visits. Absolutely, when we aren't able to go into the home, not only just to sort of observe how the home is looking, how the interactions between children and parents and children and caregivers are, but we're also not able to kind of build the trust in the same ways. Certainly we've built trust through virtual ways, but when we're not able to do the home visits, that has been a really, really hard thing for sure. So thank you for that comment. And a comment from Emily. I've heard that happening with CPS as well, and it's a big concern for our staff. Yeah, again, I think back to the comment before that CPS has apparently reported to the parents that the call or the report came from your program. That is definitely concerning, and it shouldn't be happening for sure. And it is something that you know, that I will talk to our leadership about here as well, to see if there's anything that we can do to you know, to inform the child welfare side that may still be happening. So thank you for that. Another comment here and a question. I know I have had many conversations with staff around having those harder conversations. Would you be interested in providing a training that dives deeper into this? I think that our DCYF ECAP team, we might be able to do that, Amber. So thank you. What I recommend is, I see it here, and again, we're going to be taking a look as a team, a DCYF ECAP team, at the comments and questions here in the question box, and after this webinar is done. But also, when we've closed the webinar, you're going to be receiving a survey just to get feedback from all of you today about how this webinar went. And in there, you can also, there's a question about what other further support or training do you need on this topic. So Amber, if you don't mind, you can also put it in there as well. But we will consider that and see if we can support maybe another training, sort of a next step in regard to this. That is also something that will be included in the WASA Summer Institute workshop sessions that I will be part of co-facilitating during WASA Summer Institute as we get deeper into the topic of child abuse and neglect. Another comment here is, while it is hard, I do have parents reaching out to ask more questions, and always remind them to ask me anything I may not know. To ask me anything. I may not know, but I try to find answers. The direct questions from my parents has helped me build a stronger network of information. Yeah, absolutely, Laura. That's a great comment. And, you know, that's all about the things that you are also good at doing already and that you continue to grow in, which is how do we engage with parents in a way that is equitable, that builds trust, that helps us to learn about their stories so that they can trust us with any questions that we might have for them and that they have for us. That is a great point, and why I'm just, our DCYF ECAP team, we're so proud of all the work that you are all doing, because you're rocking it. You are building relationships and maintaining relationships and doing your best to build trust in a really, really tough year this past year. So yeah, thank you for that for sure. Okay, I think that I've hit all of the questions in the question box so far. Just checking if there are any others. And if something comes up for you later on, feel free to post it in Basecamp or to send Carrie or me or Letty an email with further questions. Also, you can put it into the survey that you were asked to complete at the end of this webinar. We'll leave another few seconds here to see if other questions pop up in the question box. I'll take another drink of water. I've been talking a lot. These have been great questions, by the way. You're all thinking really deeply about it, which we appreciate. We know that this is important to you as well, and that's why you're here. Okay, I don't see any other questions or comments in the box. So we're towards the end of the time here. Our timing is actually pretty good. We end at 10:30. And as many of you who have been part of any of our DCYF ECAP webinars and sessions, that I'm on such an amazing team, and I know that it was really me talking today, but I get so much support from our team. And that includes that we make music together sometimes. And I am a former preschool teacher as well, and I love playing music, even as an amateur guitar player and musician. This is a song that I really love. I want to end this on a little bit of a hopeful note. Some of you are familiar with the song Three Little Birds, which is written and performed by Bob Marley. He's a wonderful reggae artist. And I'm going to sing the song, and you're going to be muted, but feel free to sing and dance wherever you might be. If you are worried about looking a little silly with your coworkers in your shared workspace, I would just say don't worry about that. We work with kids, we work with families. We need some silliness, we need some fun and joy and some hope. So I'm going to go ahead and sing this song. I want to make sure you are seeing still seeing the PowerPoint on the screen. I'm going to double check that. Yep.
Yes, we are, Ray.
Okay, wonderful. This song is Three Little Birds. Here we go. And please do dance. Don't worry about a thing, 'cause every little thing is gonna be alright. Singing, don't worry about a thing, 'cause every little thing is gonna be alright. Rise up this morning, smile with the rising sun. Three little birds pitched by my doorstep, singing sweet songs, melodies pure and true, saying, This is my message to you. Sing, don't worry about a thing, 'cause every little thing is gonna be alright. Sing, don't worry about a thing, 'cause every little thing is gonna be alright. 'Cause every little thing is gonna be alright. All right, I hope you were able to sing along and to dance along, because this has been a tough pandemic and a tough year, and we all work really hard, and we all need some joy as well. So hopefully this this webinar was useful to you, and that along with some learning and some reflection on the darker side of child abuse and neglect, that also we are reminded about the work that we do, and that we are bringing a lot of hope and a lot of strength for these wonderful families that we are working with and engaging every day. Thanks. In the question box, there's a link to a YouTube video about another version of this song, I believe. Thank you, Kelly, for that. And Lupe said, this is the song my son sings to his 4 girls every night before bedtime. I love that. It's a very, very fun and hopeful song. I want to end with this quote. Oh yeah, go ahead, Letty.
Oh, I just wanted to read the thank yous for you from Amber, Donna, Carla, Emily, Terry, and just the expression of love. Jess, thank you, Ray, thank you. This was amazing, uplifting. You're a wonderful voice, Ray. I know that. Thank you so much for the training. Beautiful. Thank you for your blessing us with this today. And I don't know, I just wanted you to hear these comments. It's just, you're great. Good job.
Gracias, Leticia. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, you know, we all give in the ways that we can give. You are all doing it every day. I work in a team that gives every day, and this is one of the many ways that I can give as well. So thank you for that and engaging in this. Laura said, if you can go see the Whalers, do it. So the Whalers is part of the family and the group that is connected to Bob Marley, and they are still performing. And so yes, thank you. I will go do that too. So this quote here from Fred Rogers, who we know, many of us know as Mr. Rogers, who had a TV show for children since the 60s. And it's just, he passed away a number of years ago, and he just continues to be an inspiration for love and for care and protection and honoring children every day. He said, at many times throughout their lives, children will feel the world has turned topsy-turvy. It's not the ever-present smile that will help them feel secure. It's knowing that love can hold many feelings, including sadness, and they can count on the people they love to be with them until the world turns right side up again. And Fred Rogers said this a while ago, but this could have been said this past year for sure. So it's just a reminder about how important the work we do in ECAP is, and that we are doing incredible work, and we are making a really impactful difference for children and families. So again, thank you for engaging today and for leaning into this, and would love to or I'd rather look forward to seeing what your feedback is for this webinar. And yeah, just thank you. If you have any other sort of questions, you can email myself or Letty or Carrie on our family engagement team. You can also email the ECAP inbox, which is on the screen right now. And again, please do complete the survey at the end of this. I would love to just get your feedback, including any suggestions that you have, right? Letty, anything you want to share before we're done today?
No, I believe we are done. We have some more comments on the chat box, just thanking you. This was amazing. I loved it. And thank you for being here, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, Letty. Thank you, everybody, for your time today. Hope you have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and that you are able to rest and rejuvenate in the coming weekend and beyond. Thanks again, everybody.
Bye.